Tussle your tribbles. Klaatu barata natu. Dial M for motherfucker, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mondo Money in the Bank Wrestlemania out of nowhere cash-in special. Good afternoon from a frosty day here in London town. Now, to paraphrase a famous meme, you probably want to check in on your wrestling friends because they are not okay. What it is this is Wrestlemania week. Now, back in the midst of time, WrestleMania, first 2 years, one day. One day, you just got ready on the Sunday night, WrestleMania happened. Then a few years later, they added a thing called WrestleMania Access. And WrestleMania Access was a whole, like a fan con. So you could go along, you could do commentary over certain wrestling matches, you could meet stars, you could buy merchandise, you could see various bits of set from history and stuff. And then they got bigger, right? And it kept expanding to like the point where a few years ago, New Orleans was basically infected with WWE stuff. So you might say walking down the street and you'd see Elias busking, or you'd see a brass band playing a WWE theme tune. And exponentially, as that has grown out during the week, other things have been added. So now it's not just WrestleMania in the week. You also get NXT TakeOver, which is their what's the word I'm looking for? Developmental brand, where they have basically a better show. The performers are much better, and it's usually like, if you're wise, you watch WrestleMania and then you watch NXT TakeOver, because once you watch the NXT TakeOver, like, your expectations need to drop to make it work, because it's like, got Finn Balor here, you got Batista here. Anyway, so as this has become a thing, everyone else is interested in wrestling in the week, so there are shows from everyone this week, not including NXT TakeOver and WrestleMania. And last night, the WWE Hall of Fame happened. You might all be happy to know that the British Bulldog finally got in, has finally been made a member of the Hall of Fame. Not sure why that took quite so long, to be honest, because not a particularly bad wrestler. You know, that whole SummerSlam 92 thing was a big deal. What else is happening? Bloodsport 6 is happening. ICW have shows on. All the women's promotions have stuff on. I'll try and, when I pop this up on the YouTube, I will try and provide a link to all the things happening. But it's basically 3 shows a day. Like, that started from the Monday it's just gone, all the way through to the Sundays coming. So all of your wrestling fans are just going to be like, they're going to look like The Undertaker. They're going to be like, so many headlocks. Anyway, so to cash in on this particular trend at the moment, I thought, as you can probably tell by the specially done decor, have you seen my mate? I would do a wrestling show based on the comics to do with wrestling. Now, traditionally, the format for people from the comic world to, when they cover wrestling comics, they usually have the angle of like, oh my god, this is so goofy, it is so bad, I can't believe it. And like, I don't know if the comic world has too much of a pedestal to be mocking the genre of the medium of wrestling, because guys in spandex who have issues with each other, you know, in stories told in an episodic fashion. What did I just describe? Was it wrestling? Was it superhero comics? Because it's kind of both. They're kind of the same thing. Wrestling in comics is a bit more difficult to do in the same way that horror is, because so much of what makes both things work is timing, and you control the timing in a comic. So obviously, like, if you're reading a horror comic, there's no such thing as a jump scare, because like, you're turning the page at your own speed, man. So how are they going to scare you? And equally for wrestling, like that super kick out of nowhere that Shawn Michaels does, you're like, oh my god. Like, well, if you're reading it, it's like, oh look, he did a super kick. It's more difficult to do, but it can be done, as we will talk about later in the evening. Now, wrestling, like many fandoms, has got a weird symptom where it wants to proclaim people to be fake fans. I don't know why. I don't know what the end game of that is, but it does seem to be like there's a desire to root out casuals, as they're called, which are people who've only just got into it because how dare they not be into it? It's kind of like a punk thing. Like, I've got a couple of mates on here who got some grief from a particular punk Facebook group, and their argument was, well, you can't be a real punk because you weren't around at the 100 Club in 1976 to see the Stranglers and the Lurkers. And you're like, yeah, sorry they weren't born. Like, obviously that was their fault, right? Now, as you've probably gathered from talking to me in real life, or most of what I write, I don't believe in a hierarchy of fans, okay? I figure if you've watched a show, if you've bought a ticket, if you've bought a comic, or if you've spent some money in a comic shop, you're in. Like, you are in. There is no hierarchy. There are just idiots. Idiots who want to prove they are the superior fan. The ones who can, like, name every single match that Dave Meltzer classed as a 5-star match. Or they can name every single person who was a Green Lantern, or every secret identity the Batman's ever had. And it's kind of like, it's trivia and nobody cares, and what's the end goal? Like, do you want to be the biggest fan? Like, are you? It's like, yeah, I could name every single match that Daniel Bryan had back when he was Bryan Danielson in ROH, and you've just started watching WrestleMania, so I guess I'm the biggest fan. Like, have a fucking gold star, mate. Well done, you. So I don't like that stuff. But with that said, like, there is the inevitability that, like, someone will say, oh, look at this bloke, like, he's just doing it to be trendy. And literally I am, because I'm hijacking the trend for my own evil ends. But if you take a close look behind me, you will see several bits of evidence to suggest that actually this boy has been following this ludicrous, violent pantomime since the last century, and well before the turn of that century. So my first wrestling show, the thing that got me into it, because I'm sure, like, I had seen World of Sport on UK TV, but if you've seen a Big Daddy match, you've seen every Big Daddy match. It wasn't like he wasn't a very versatile guy, if I'm honest with you. Okay, the stuff I've seen, and I'm going with memories from about 35 years ago, and I don't think I've ever particularly followed it. I did try and pick up a World of Sport DVD, actually, but the one that exists, unfortunately has footage of Jimmy Savile on it. So that doesn't exist anymore. That has been cancelled from the collective consciousness. No more World of Sport. I'm sure if I looked it up, I could find the good matches of, like, Mick McManus or Adrian Street, and it's on my list. But that's the great thing about life. If you're not like a I know everything guy, then there's always new stuff. Every day there is new stuff that you haven't discovered yet, and you'll have it to look forward to, and it'll be great. So we have, just going around here, we have King of Colosseum 2 down here for the PS2, which is now, what was it? So, the guys who did Fire Pro, and Fire Pro will come up frequently in this, trust me, they decided to branch out into the world of 3D wrestling, and they had a couple of goes on the they had a go on the PS1, which was AJPW King of Soul, and it was quite good. And this is the second of the games, but the first game is actually 2 games, because in Uber Nerdness, they didn't, like, just go, here's our new game, and enjoy it. They were like, here's our new game, but, like, there are a lot of Japanese wrestling federations. It's like New Japan, All Japan, Dragon Gate, FMW, Onita's own thing that I can never remember the name of when he left FMW. There's Michinoku Pro, Soccer Pro, and that's not even taking in the women's stuff, like All Japan Women's, or there's a lot, right? And that's not even factoring in the Gajins, like the Americans who went over, who were and weren't sometimes part of the regular rosters, like your Samoa Joes and your Vaders, your Stan Hansens, your Bruiser Brodies, your Hulk Hogans. They all went over for a year. 2 called Scorpio. There was a deal between ECW and one of the Japanese guys, I would assume FMW, because Mike Olsen was an ECW champion for a bit, and Sabu was obviously a hardcore guy. I wouldn't swear to it, But they split out the two rosters. They had two games which were the same game, but they had different rosters. So you would save one game's roster onto your memory card, and then one version of the game would have all the wrestlers, which is many. What else? I'm not going to go through all of it because there's a lot. Alright, but we've got things like the Sega Saturn Fighting Viper game, which is what if some of the All Japan guys in the mid-90s, just before the good ones went off to form Noah, what if they were in a fighting game with some of the guys from the Sega fighting game, Fighting Vipers? It's a bit weird, but it works. It's quite cool. It breaks up the room. Obviously, there's a copy of WCW, the UK comic, with the sweatband still in place. I'll just move this out the way and hope it doesn't fall apart. Hey, nobody died. Yeah, so I discovered that on a recent Coleman's Comics catalogue clear-out job. Didn't know about it, but apparently when Marvel did the WCW comic in the early 90s, which was cool stuff, by the way, it's that pre-Hogan era, which I really love, which is like Sting, Flair, Luger, the Steiners, Ravishing Rick Rude, the Dangerous Alliance, the Brainbusters. Well, they weren't called the Brainbusters there. That was the WWF name. But anyway, you've got a really good lineup of stuff, and it's all kind of like big, weird stuff. And then Hogan shows up and says, hey, what if I come along and win everything, and I bring my rubbish mates and stink up the joint? So before you had like a really young Chris Benoit or a young Eddie Guerrero doing their stuff, and yeah, now we have to have the Nasty Boys doing stuff. I mean, they weren't exactly Bret Hart in their prime, but 10 years after they were over, just big lads in rubbish bags with some tie-dye waving their armpit at people. Wasn't great. Thanks, Hulk. There's the Weekly World of Wrestling Japanese magazine there, which treats wrestling in Japan like a real sport, so it just looks great. I think Jim, I think you sent me that because you're always really good with the Japanese import stuff, and you answered one of my questions about Guitar Wolf last night, so thank you very much for that. There's the ECW Collector Special from that. I mean, talk about your Icaruses, man. So WCW folded, ECW folded. Turns out WWF were funding ECW to a degree and bought the rights to the ECW name from Paul Heyman, and Rob Van Dam, somewhat of an underutilized guy in WWE, but also just went into the Hall of Fame last night, suggested why don't we do a one-night stand show? Which, if it had been a one-off thing, or even the second year's one wasn't too bad actually, it would have been a quintessential bit of history, right? The ECW One Night Stand show is one of my favourite shows of all time, like in the entire pantheon of wrestling. That show brings the chills to my heart every single time. It's it just finishes so many stories. It cuts loose a lot of time. Paul Heyman is shooting on the likes of JBL and Edge at a time when you really weren't supposed to say the truth to Edge, because that was around the time he had had an affair with Lita, and they had fired Matt Hardy for saying, your guy is having an affair with my girlfriend? I'm not a fan of this. It all went a bit extreme, and it's a great show, and I urge you to track it down. And it's a weird thing where, if you're not aware, there was previously a subscription service called the WWE Network, which was basically the archive of everything to do with American wrestling to a certain degree, because WWF/WWE ended up buying everything. They bought ECW, they bought WCW, and with that they got rights to various tape libraries like the NWA stuff, the WCCW stuff, Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I don't know, please don't shout at me if I'm wrong, Jim Cornette. I'm going to do something nice for you quite soon, so don't worry. If I'm wrong on that, I'm covered. Okay, I'm covered. I will get the back of this. I don't want you to piss on my grave. Please, Jim Cornette, if nothing else comes out of this video, please do not piss on my grave. So WWE have this network, and it was an amazing thing where you just had the library of everything to a degree. It became a lot more it became a lot more suspectable to the times. So when Hulk Hogan gets found out for having a racist rampage during his sex tape, which is not a sentence that should exist, they just kind of delete him. They didn't remove all of his footage because like Hulk Hogan's fairly significant presence for at least the first 9 years of WrestleMania, and he's the main event for about 6 or 7 of them, I think. He is definitely up to 5. 6 is the Ultimate Warrior, 7 is against Sergeant Slaughter, 8 is Sid. Yeah, so he's definitely... And 9, he's not meant to be in the main event, but he is, because that's the night of the infamous Bret Hart gets beaten by Yokozuna because of salt, and then for some reason Mr. Fuji says, I challenge you, Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan's there with his best mate Bret Hart. They've had no interaction previously, but he's there just to see how Bret is, and suddenly Hulk Hogan's wrestling for the world title after the world title match at WrestleMania, and he wins! Like, Bret Hart was not a happy man, and like I could talk for quite a while about that, because it's one of the more intriguing uses and abuses of power in the nature of the wrestling business at the time. So they can't remove Hogan, but they can kind of play down how he is. Like, I haven't looked at the network for a while, but I imagine if I went for a search for Chris Benoit, it would be quite a muted one. Like, his matches with Eddie Guerrero or Chris Jericho would come up if I looked for those, but I don't think that would be something they would want to say, hey, we have like the entire back catalogue of Chris Benoit, including his Stampede days and his ECW days and his WCW days and his WWF days. But now they have gone to Peacock because the WWE have lost quite a lot of money in the last year or so due to the whole pandemic thing, because they make a significant amount of their money on the road through live shows, and that's not really been a thing. Like, they're doing shows, obviously WrestleMania's coming up, but they don't have an 80,000 human being gates coming in anymore. So they don't have the WrestleMania income, and they don't have the merch that comes from that, yada yada. So they sold to an American company called Peacock. Now, I don't know if it's an outright sale or if it's you can broadcast our footage for a certain period of time, but Peacock have been quite snippy with the old WWE archive, because, and you can argue whether this is good or bad, but it's a thing that's happening, there are various things that do not hold up well under the sensibilities of 2021. The DX segment, where they showed up in blackface to mock the Nation of Domination, who started out as like the Black Power stable, and that kind of dissipated a bit, I guess. But anyway, like, Triple H is up there in blackface mocking The Rock, and it's like ain't gonna age too well, is it? No. And there's gonna be other stuff. Like, from what I've heard, I'm not subscribed to Peacock, it seems to be quite a haphazard way of uploading the archive. So instead of going like, here's everything chronologically, they're like, here's the first 7 WrestleManias, and here's the first couple of Survivor Series, and a few Saturday night main events around the period to kind of place the stuff that we put in context. Again, one of the great things about the network was that you got all the Saturday night main events, all the Raws, all the wrestling challenges, all the Shotgun Saturday nights. So you weren't just getting a pay-per-view, you get the this is why this is happening, and then the fallout on the other end. So my first wrestling show was... It's weird, because it's like, it still remains one of my favourite shows, and it's the show where I went, I love this stuff, but in the 2 main events, because it's a double main event, it broke kayfabe entirely. For the uninitiated, kayfabe is simply the language of illusion, the stuff that you use to make people suspend their disbelief, where people, if you're doing what you're meant to be doing, which is convincing the viewer that what they're seeing is real in some way, that's when wrestling really works. That's when you're like I know, like, he's just working against that guy, and all of this is choreographed to a degree, and they're like improvising, but they know where they're going in the end. But Paul Heyman just, said to Edge, hey, hide your wives, it's Edge, relating to the very recent Matt Hardy's girlfriend Lita being seduced by Edge. Or maybe that's an unfair thing, I'm not there, I don't know, but one way or the other, Matt Hardy's at home, Lita's out on the road with Edge, and then they're in a relationship, right? So that's what kayfabe is. It's the kind of like, hold on, this might be for real. Like, there might be some real stuff. There's some of my favourite bits of kayfabe. The Rock in 2002. He had just come back from Hollywood because he'd been a big star, and he was playing on it because WWE fans are a bit weird like that. They're a bit like how dare you leave to pursue other things? Why aren't you out every week breaking your body until it doesn't run anymore for the same money? And The Rock was like, they want me in Hollywood, and I don't need to be here all the time because I'm The Rock. And if I show up every week, I'll be over, and if I show up every 6 months, I'll be over. So Rock comes back, and it's a setup for his whole thing, because he had the match the previous year at WrestleMania 18 with Hulk Hogan, which is, it's not my favourite match of all time, but in terms of like working a crowd and the electricity and the eventness of it, it's probably the best WrestleMania match. Like, if you just want that, if you want to understand what the buzz of WrestleMania is and why it's more significant than, say, Backlash or Fastlane or No Way Out or Elimination Chamber or any other interchangeable generic pay-per-views, Rock versus Hogan at WrestleMania 18 is the epitome of the business of just doing what it does the best. And it's all kind of weird because Hogan's really screwing with The Rock in that match. Like, I don't believe that The Rock knew what was coming, because Hogan's meant to be the big bad, and he played the big bad in WCW for a good fight. Like, when did the NWO happen? 1996, I think, right? So he's got 5 years at least of being the worst baddie there ever was, and he did a really good job of it. Like, he went from Say Your Prayers and Everybody Love Me to, and the most adored guy in the world of American wrestling, to, like, trash thrown in the ring, and he did it in such an amazing way. So how the match goes is The Rock is the young lion, and the big bad Hulkster wants to abuse his power again, and like, he's starting with Austin and Hogan, and Austin and Rock, sorry, and they're gonna just take each other on and damage each other as much as they can, and Hogan wants to put The Rock away. But Hogan doesn't come out like evil heel Hogan. Like, he's really playing that crowd. He's doing the whole who, brother, oh yeah, like that stuff. Like, he's working that crowd to like him, to the point where midway through the match, The Rock becomes the bad guy, and not intentionally. Like, he's not working, like, he wants people to boo him. He wants people to like him, but Hogan's really, like, being super heroic. And it's a weird match, and in the end of it, they kind of shake hands and make friends, and everyone's like, yay, Hulk Hogan's back. And it's like, 2 weeks ago you ran a truck at The Rock, and now this? I don't buy it. I don't buy that Hogan didn't know what he was doing. He's too experienced. He knew, like, how to play that crowd so they would cheer him. He had, like, got 20-25 years of experience of it. If he wanted that crowd throwing garbage at him like they did at WCW Bash of the Beach 1996, he could have done it. I don't buy it. Anyway, I have digressed somewhat. So my first wrestling show is SummerSlam 1990, and I love it even now because Rowdy Piper on commentary, who you might have guessed, a bit of an influence, like a bit of a fan of Rowdy Piper. You've got the Ultimate Warrior. I don't know why I connected with the Warrior. I don't get it. Like, I look back at his matches now, and you can see he's basically, like, led move by move. Like, you could not say to him, okay, I need a 45-minute match, and I need these 5 moves, and I need you to hit a hope spot around here. Like, you couldn't. The Warrior was like, shake ropes, run to ring, get knackered, shake ropes, test of strength, clothesline, 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 let the bad guy beat you up for about 4 minutes, Hulk back up, clothesline, 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 gorilla press slam, body splash, 1, 2, 3 at the end. But there's an electricity about the Warrior. It's the intangible that he possesses that transcends things like work rate or mat technician skills or aerial ability, or even his promos. Like, his promos make no sense. Like, there is an art to a promo, and there's a certain amount of information that you're meant to get across. Damn it, my phone's going. Well, I will just have to hope it doesn't pick it up, right? Because it's probably somebody saying, do you want to buy a iPhone for £20? And I don't, so I'll live without it. So, Warrior is wrestling Ravishing Rick Rude in the main event for the world title, because Rick Rude's the only person who has a pin over him. And Rude has his working boots on, and the other match is Hulk Hogan versus the Earthquake. And the story is, previously Hulk Hogan had been injured by the 400-pound Earthquake, whose whole shtick was, his finishing move was he would run one side of the ropes, then the other, and then he'd land on your ribs. And Hogan got the injury, and he was off because he'd been injured so badly that the Earthquake had taken him out of wrestling, and you were all encouraged to send in your cards and well wishes, hoping maybe Hogan would return. Apparently it was just a thing so the WWF could get as many people's addresses as they can so they could add them to the mailing list. And so everyone who said, Hulk, I hope you're okay, ended up on the WWE mailing list forever, as far as I'm aware. So good work, those guys. I'm sure those catalogues help sell a lot of things. I have one of the catalogues behind me. I didn't wish Hulk Hogan well. I don't know why I have that catalogue. It's one of those things that happened in life. So, here are the two kayfabe breakers. The two moments where I went, this looks cool, and I could buy everything else. I don't buy this, right? First, Hogan versus Earthquake, which is pretty, Earthquake was one of those guys who should have been pushed to the moon as, the monster bad guy. That guy, if he was booked right, he would have been another Vader or another Brock Lesnar. And he was always just kind of shackled with dumb stuff. He kicked the crap out of Hogan, he kicked the crap out of the Warrior, and then they were like, well, you've lost, do you want to be in a tag team with Typhoon? He's another fat guy. Okay, it's a working gig, I guess. I did beat Hulk Hogan. No? Okay. So, here's the thing. And again, Earthquake hits Hogan with the jumping on his rib cage. Hogan's ribs are damaged away he goes. Hogan needs R&R, right? So you've got this match, it's going the way it's going, and oh my god, as with every Hogan match, Hogan's shtick is, takes beating, he hulks up, which is the whole, shaking his hair like a sheepdog, and, vibrating and shaking the fists, and, someone gets a shot, and another shot, and Hogan swakes him off, and then does the comeback. It's called the hulking up. Earthquake hits the running of the ropes and jumping on Hogan's ribcage. Now, if you've established previously that, this 400-pound guy jumping on your ribcage is going to take you out, whatever mood you're in, physics and weight don't change. You know, that stuff doesn't alter. I don't care what kind of mood you're in. 400-pound guy jumps on your ribs and it has been established that's going to take you out. It'll do it again. But not at SummerSlam 90. At SummerSlam 90, Hogan hulks up, brother. I don't know, maybe he got some good vitamin D that day, or maybe he was in a good mood, or maybe he has titanium ribs now. He's done a Wolverine shtick where these can't be broken because they're unbreakable and stuff. Oh, it's adamantium, not titanium. Sorry, nerds. But he just stands up, and then it goes exactly how you think it's going to go. 3 punches to the face, whip to the ropes, big boot, 1 leg drop, it's over. And I'm I'm not quite sure about that one. And then the main event, as I said previously, the Warrior versus Rick Rude. So what happens is, it's a steel cage match, right? And that means all bets are off, because Rude is vicious, nasty guy, will go to any lengths, and Warrior wants to prove he's still got that bug from Wrestlemania 5 that Rude pinned him, and it's clear that it's not a clean pin because his manager's holding the Warrior's leg down as Rude pins him. So you could say a rational person, that ain't one that blemishes your record, but the Warrior was not a rational person, and that man had promos. The promo was meant to be this, right? I have this match with you. This is why I want to beat you up. The match is happening at this time, at this location, on this day. And everything else is just embellishment to get yourself over. But you're meant to basically be an advert for the show. That's how it's meant to work. But yeah. Warrior was just like, strap in the rockets and the 14 moons of Arcturus will align upon my destructicity, and you will know the pain of the ultimate stuff. You know, I don't know what you're saying, but it's amazing because the hairs on my arm are tingling. So I don't know what you're channeling, but you've gotten it. So Warrior wants to beat Rude. Rude is the #1 contender because he's the one with the clean pin over Warrior. Not clean, but like he got him in the ring at WrestleMania. It's a thing. Warrior's got pride. And it's a weird one because there's not a lot of build up. Like in their previous feuds, they had some intense stuff going on. Like the Great Muscle pose down at Royal Rumble 90 is a thing of beauty. But yeah. So Piper's on commentary, right? And the shtick with a steel cage back then was there weren't any rules. Like you pin your opponent or you climb over the top. Everything else fair game. So in theory, in the same way, if you think about a no DQ match, Rude could have brought a gun. Like he didn't, obviously, because wrestling matches would be a lot shorter if anybody thought laterally about the logistics of a non-DQ match. They're going back and forth, and quite early on, like Rude's got the upper hand on the Warrior, and Piper says, Warrior's got those tassels on his arm. Why doesn't Rude just tie the tassel to the cage and then climb over the top or go through the door? And then he'll be the World Heavyweight Champion. And Vince McMahon on commentary is kind of like, you've just noticed the hole in the story and you've brought it up on camera. We haven't got time for that, Vince interjects. And it's like, Piper's like, we've got all night. It's a no time limit match. And then Vince just starts talking about anything else. But I was like, yeah, why doesn't he tie his tassels to the... Yeah, and that broke it, but it cemented my love. So I hope that is proof enough of my wrestling fandom and that I have the qualifications. But if I don't, let me show you a thing. See this? This is a Dreamcast disc. And what it does is you put it in your Dreamcast, and once it's in and it's loaded, you take it out and you can play games from any region, including America and Japan. So if you've got a disc from Japan, say Fire Pro Wrestling D for the Dreamcast, you can play it, right? So this would have required me to have got the Dreamcast, got the disc, imported the game from Japan. This is not an action of a casual, but if that's not enough, then that's fine. What else have we got here? We've got PS2 memory card #1. Now, if you got Fire Pro Returns on the PS2, what it allowed you to do would be to save rosters to the memory card up to 500, which sounds like a lot, but if you start looking to the history of wrestling, actually it's not many. But this is my Japanese card, so this would be New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, Dragon Gate, FMW, Noah, UWFI, a lot of the MMA stuff. Again, like, because you need to get all those things, right? Because you need to have the extensive roster, and you needed the All Japan Women's stuff as well, because Bull Nakano and like Cutie Suzuki. And, yeah, okay, so okay, that's probably not enough. Right, that's fine. Okay, give me a sec here. I'll be a Japanese copy of Virtual Pro Wrestling for the N64, which is on the Aki engine and remains the greatest wrestling game engine ever happened. So the chronology is this, then you get WCW World Tour, then you get WCW NWO Revenge, then you get WWF Wrestlemania, then you get WWF No Mercy, and finally you get Virtua Pro Wrestling 2, which is probably the best wrestling game ever made, and really, and I'm appealing to all the wrestling game developers, and because the AEW game doesn't look like it's done it. Please get the ability to use this engine, not an updated, well, maybe the one for like Def Jam Vendetta or something, but like the game mechanics and the ability to download wrestlers on Steam. I will sell the blood of children to play that game, the updated Aki engine game. Okay, so please do that. because I do love Fire Pro, as will become apparent as we go on, but this is the best. This is the absolute best. Japanese cartridge, which means you need a N64 passport, so you plug that in, and then you plug in your UK or whatever region is appropriate to your device into the back, and then away you go, and you're playing Japanese games. What else have we got here? This would be the American PS2 memory card, which would be NWA, WCCW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the WWF in the 70s when it was the WWF, the 80s, which is the Hulk Hogan era, the 90s, which is the New Generation, the late 90s, which is the Attitude era, Ruthless Aggression, which is when WWF buys ECW and WCW, and some of the PG era, and Japanese wrestlers who would have worked in the America at the time, in the American federations at the time. Also, you know, so you've got like Jushin Ligers and a bunch of them. So that's the PS. But okay, no, I get you. That's fine. Then we have Touken Retsuden 1, which is, now I might get corrected on this, but I think I'm right, but I won't swear to it. Touken Retsuden is the engine that would be used for what started off as Exciting Hour in Japan, and then became the 2K engine much later down the line for the WWE games. So if you played WWE SmackDown vs. Raw, or Here Comes the Pain, or Shut Your Mouth, or SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, or WWE 2K12, this is where it starts. Like, this engine. This is the beginning. It's not the greatest game. Like, it's not as good as 2. 2's amazing. But it's still pretty good. N64 Japanese import, because it was never translated into English. You will fan. And what's this? Oh, okay. So on the Xbox 360 you could rip tunes, right? You could just put CDs in, take tunes, save them to your Xbox internal hard drive. So the early WWE games on the Xbox, WWE Raw, WWE Raw 2, not WrestleMania 21, but then the subsequent like SmackDown versus Raw games, they would allow you to use music you'd ripped into your internal hard drive as the theme tunes for your created wrestlers, or for the wrestlers in the game. You could just change it, right? So it might be that somebody was so intense about all this and wanted to make sure their roster and was as accurate as possible that they bought this, and this would be the WWE Anthology. So this is 3 discs of the best, and I say that with so many quotations, the best WWE songs, WWF songs. If you want Together, which is the Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's theme tune for their wedding at SummerSlam, here it is, it's on this disc. If you want both versions of Sexy by Shawn Michaels, the one where Shawn sings and the one where Sherry Martel, God rest her soul, she sings it, right here. So yeah, I bought this not because I think the music of the WWF is entirely good, except for the Piledriver album, which is astounding, but because I wanted an accurate wrestling game. I spent more time actually ripping the thing and setting it up and making sure it worked okay, and then swearing at it, and then having to put a new memory card, than actually playing the game. But by God, were my entrances accurate? Oh yeah. Okay. Now, at this point, we take a break, because I need to put on my sponsor hat. And hopefully this won't take out the catalogue. There we go. So, people ask me, do I miss the comics industry? I do and I don't. I do until I'm back in it, and then I don't. Like, I don't miss bagging for several hours at a time. I don't miss grading, where you're checking the corners of some crappy 1970s comics. It's a first appearance of Monkey Fist or whatever, and it's like this is where it's over £100 because it's the first appearance and you need to make sure. I don't care, just read the things. You know what I mean? Just read them. Like, if you want a commemorative plate, buy a commemorative plate, right? Don't worry about this like rare stuff, it doesn't matter. Anyway, So I don't miss that. I don't miss jetting up a till. I really don't miss taking down deliveries from a TNT truck in the middle of the road on a Wednesday morning and having to take out like 30 odd boxes single-handedly and then running them all into the shop while hoping nobody nicks them while I'm running back and forth like an idiot, and then unboxing them and then counting all the stock and then turning them into standing orders and then bagging them all and then putting them on the shelves. Don't miss that for a second. You can keep that. And the addition of making sure when you're counting that you don't miss the variant cover, which is like the 1 in 100, so you can't put in someone's standing order because there's a special customer for the variants. You're like, oh, it's just unnecessary crap inflicted on the comics industry because the publishers worked out that retailers use cycle sheets, so they created a way to make sure that retailers ignore their cycle sheets. That's the only reason for the variant cover. Everything else, just manipulation. What I do miss is the interaction, though, and I'm very lucky that I was scouted by the lovely Janine Van Moosel as on my last day at Humanoids to be her booth bitch. So every once in a while, pre-pandemic, she says, we are doing a show here. I'm like, okay, and I'll get on the train and do the show here, and I get to travel and read, and I love that. I love like being on the train and reading, like, 'cause I don't read at home, 'cause I'm rubbish. But on the train, like, an old issue of the Comics Journal from 1987, 4 hours to get there, I'm in, I'm all there, get me an overpriced bag of crisps and a can of Coke, loving it. I do like the interaction, and I do like hanging out, and I do like the idea that there are dozens and hundreds of things that I don't know about that you'll probably see at the con, and I like seeing people dressing up in like ridiculous costumes. So the Thursday's like the exciting day because that's set up and you get to look around and go, oh, have they got this? Oh, I wonder what that is. And then the Friday is the first wave of like, hey, the people, hello, the people, good to see you, good to see anyone, please buy our wares. And then the Saturday is more intense because people tend not to work on Saturdays, so you got more people. And then like midway for Saturday, you're like, I'm kind of losing the will to live, and I can only look at like anime toys for so long. And also, why are all these children so loud? Are children really loud now? Is my volume going? And also, I was doing this when my like neck and shoulder was still up the creek from years of the unloading the boxes I described previously. And Cocodamol only goes so far. Last show I did, I think, was it London Film or Comic Con? It's either London Film, Comic Con, or MCM. I was wandering about in a just kind of stupor. I'm like, I found all the comics that are going to pay for me doing this. I can't anymore with these humans. But then, no, it's definitely MCM, and I'll tell you why. As a terrible smoker, like, I have come to terms that the likes of me should be outside at all times. Just outside, don't come in. Preferably stay outside forever if you must. So, if you've ever been to the Excel Centre in Canning Town, it is a long building. Okay, it's a long building, really long. So what you have to do if you have a fag is you walk about 5 minutes from your stall to the door to take you to the main corridor, and then it's another, on a good day, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 at the most, to walk from the convention bit to the outside where you can smoke. But this isn't a normal day. This is a convention day, and people want to give you free hugs, and there's congas going on, and photo shoots, and old men being surreptitious and staring in obnoxious ways. So you kind of walk over to their eye line and go like, what are you doing, mate? Being a bit weird. Right, they're children. That kind of thing. So I was on one of these fag adventures, wondering if this had been my whole life, or if anything would ever happen again, or if I was just doomed to be on the con. And you have 2 fags because you might as well make it worth the journey, because like by the time you sat down and your knees have stopped swearing at you, you finished the fag, so you have a second one. So I'm on my second one, and this dog wanders into my orbit, and it's like, hello. I'm like, hello dog? Okay, sure, I like dogs. You may have noticed this. It's one of my things on social media. I am pro the dog. Go dogs, right? And it's really nice, and it's on a lead, and this really nice couple start talking to me, Amelia and Ben, and they are selling several books to do with boobs. And I'm like, are you my new parents? Like, have you been sent by the gods? What is this degree of stuff? And they have turned out to be two of my best friends in recent years. They have been incredibly supportive in a lot of ways that I am not very good at saying thank you for, but they've been really there. And also, I really fancy Amelia's mum. She is as hot. I did go out with them for a day on their birthday. I spent the whole time chatting up her mum in front of her dad because she's that hot. Sorry, Amelia, but your mum's banging. So they do a book, which also comes with a playing card set, and it was one of those things I was putting together as like one of my thank you for being my friend, because I realise I am a difficult human being in real life. I was trying to put a photo set for this thing, and I got as far as one person agreeing to do it, where we were playing boobs trumps, and then the pandemic happened, so all outdoors was like, no, that's not happening anymore. So it's on my list. If you would like to do this, then get in touch, and when lockdown lessens a bit, we'll work something out, and there'll be some pictures, and I don't know, I'll buy you some sweets or something, whatever. So, this, my dears, is the big bouncing bumper book of birds. Birds? Wow, the Freud on that. I'm so sorry. My 1970s TV lexicon, because in my head I'm basically in a carry-on with Spike Milligan guest starring the whole time, and I do try to adapt to the 21st century, but that's how I grew up, and I'm sorry, like, some of that vernacular just remains. So this is written by Ben and Amanda, and it is a guide to the bosom in various artistic forms, and the images, some of the images you see exist in the playing cards, and it's very good. I suspect it may be of some medical and technical use to some of you lonelier types. It does also have a nice bit on the moob there, so if you're a gentleman of the stout persuasion, some information. So, I bought this off them at the time because I had to, because obviously it's bright pink, and it's got boobs, and I'm a child. And it's available, if you hit up Ben Schlito, I will add him as a link on my Facebook comments when I post this. Yeah, get this off him, it's really good, and see if you can get the card set as well, which I don't have to hand because this place is a state because I had to excavate everything to find this lot, so sorry about that, but they do exist, and they're great. So yes, this is our sponsor today, the big bouncing bumper book of boobs. Go out, buy this. Don't go out because no shops are open. Go online, give Ben your money. He also has a very good comic going at the moment called Genocide Boy. He's currently he's working on loads of stuff, and he's a really good illustrator, so hit him up and go be his friend, because he's a really nice chap. That is his lovely wife, and I love you both very much. So, with all that said and done, second thing on the agenda once I take off the hat. Now, I have a habit of making up songs, right? Usually when I'm like just showing off, which is this whole video actually. But I got the itinerary from Fever Blister as a things you will need to be a show on our channel. And there's a banner. Well, I don't have access to a banner, so I can't do anything about that. But you need a theme tune. I can do something about that. So, if you give me a second to get my props, I can move all this stuff now that the show and tell is done. Shampala. Right, that's the props needed. Just gonna scoot that. Nope, you can't see it. That's fine. Now, so, chatting to lovely young American lady this morning called Molly. Molly, this is dedicated to you. Shalala. You send me a lot of gifts, Mol. Boy, this is exciting, right? Hey, look, here's Nevs looking at a phone. Really should. Maybe I should have learned the song before recording, but I have a lot to do today, so that doesn't work. You have a funny book shanty. Ah, no, okay, I'm near it. Wow. Something about tails, prunes. Showtime. So, Fever Blister, Captain Crappy. This is the theme tune for Mondo Funny Books. La, 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 la. Make a tea while I regale ye with tales of long boxes of tat. You're going hoping for meta barons. You end up with Green Lanterns. I mean, it's hardly Crazy Cat. It's hardly Crazy Cat. Thank you. Thank you. This will be available as a ringtone soon. Because by God, if there's something kids from the 21st century love, it's Irish folk sea shanties about comics. That's going to be a ringtone, right? So, as I said at the top of this, usual procedure, here are wrestling comics, they're a bit silly, and I don't think that's a fair representation, because there are two off the top of my head that are really, really good. I say off the top of my head. I might have actually thought about this a bit. Might have spent quite a lot of the night thinking about this video. Do you know what I'm doing? It just looks like I've fallen out of skip. So the first one, good comic about wrestling, is the comic book story of professional wrestling. I didn't know this existed. One of my exes, when she was in Paris, thank you Esther, picked this up for me, and I was like, oh my God, this exists. It is exactly what it says it is, and I feel at this point in the video I have established my wrestling nerd credentials, but I was reading through this and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. This is the chronological history of wrestling while jumping about a bit. So, like, if there's a bit on how CMLL fit into New Japan's history, they will do a little sub-bit about CMLL and say what it's about. So this takes you all the way back to the shoot days, when wrestling was a carny thing, where like you would have to wrestle the shooter for 3 minutes and stuff. It takes you to the days of Frank Gotch and stuff like that. And it's really, really coolly drawn as well. So the artwork is by, I think... Oh man, I suck. One thing I didn't do, like I had to find the wrestling games. Say who the artist is. Okay, so it's Ivory. It's either Aubrey Stitterson or Chris Romano. Those are the two people whose names are on the book. But yeah, it's really well drawn. Like, it really captures motion, and they've really caught some of the best moments. Like, this is a random page, but like the Dusty Rhodes Ric Flair feud in the NWA from the 80s. Oh my God, that is wrestling. Like, if you take nothing away from this besides Jim Cornette, please don't hurt me. The Dusty Rhodes Hard Time promo in itself, regardless of context, regardless of his feud with Ric Flair, is one of the most inspiring bits of oration I have ever heard. And it will lift you, like, out of your misery, and you'll be like, I'm gonna go fight Poland. I can do it, all of it. Like me, Poland, I'm having it. Right? I do have a story about that, so I can't tell that here. So yeah, it's just like, here's some more NWA stuff. It's just really good. It's like so informative. There are so many subsections, and there's a glossary for things like kayfabe, or the various terminology that, like face and heel, which have only come into the vernacular in the last, since 97? Well, whenever, yeah, late 97, when the screw job happened and we all got to see what was going on backstage. Here's some of the stuff with the Bullet Club and all that stuff, and some Randy Savage stuff. There's a look at gimmicks. Basically, if you have a wrestling friend in your life, no matter how full nerd they have gone, whether they have just bought a Daniel Bryan t-shirt for this weekend, or if they can name Hulk Hogan's finisher in Japan, this is for them. Like, if you have any interest in the subject, this is your Idiot 101 book. I highly recommend it. It's so extensive, it's so well researched, it's so well drawn. Start here, because it's great. Like, highest possible recommendation from Mondo Funny Books. And related, this is why you can't hurt me, Jim. I had a look this morning. Unfortunately, it's out of print. I'm going for silly morning now. But this is Behind the Curtain by Jim Cornette. Now, if you don't know who Jim Cornette is, then your life's about to get significantly more interesting. Jim Cornette has done everything in wrestling. Promoter, wrestler, manager, writer. Like, he's been around for a really, really long time, and he knows everything. And because he has a gift for saying this thing you're doing is a really bad idea, he gets into lots of trouble. But he is an incredibly engaging, entertaining, hilarious, heartbreaking character. And if you ever find a Jim Cornette shoot video on YouTube, watch it, because that man has been around. He has studied everything. Most recently, contentiously, he says on the Dark Side of the Ring documentaries that he is the one who came up with the finish for the infamous Bret Hart Shawn Michaels match at Survivor Series 97. I believe him, like, for the reasons that he gives, that, like, it's such an obtuse reference to do that. It's not a thing you're going to come up with by just sitting there going, I wonder how we could finish this. Like, the stuff that he brought to it, like, yeah, you need to know your history. And that's what Jim does here. He brings the history. It's various anecdotes. It's, for things to do with wrestling, it is surprisingly egoless. Like, if you ever read something written by a wrestler, like specifically, say, the Hulk Hogan autobiography, there is an inability to write a story that doesn't make you look like the best in all of it. Like, Hogan's really bad at it. If you meet people who've been in wrestling for a while, they have a habit, and it's because it's so ingrained into the culture of wrestling of, and that's why I'm the best. Like, WWE videos are really bad for that, because they take history and they say, like, and that's why this was the best decision. Jim has a selection of anecdotes here, and really this ought to be volume 1 of many. Like, so what have we got here? So this is drawn by Dennis Midry, and the stories they are originally Jim's stories, and they have been turned into comic form by a writer known as Brandon Easton. This was published by IDW, because IDW are somehow still around. It's got an intro by him. Then the first story is about the man who defeated Jim Crow in Memphis. The man who knew the Iron Sheik's real name. The Jerry Lawler Andy Kaufman story is one of my particular favourites. This is such a... I was talking earlier about kayfabe, and this is the definition of kayfabe right here. Kaufman, a real actor, got into a feud with Jerry Lawler, and then Lawler injures him, and then it looks like they're not feuding anymore because the actor gone too far, but then something else happens and they're back to feuding. And Lawler was like, I hate you saying that you're a champion, and Andy Kaufman had won several championships. They were women's championships, but yeah, he won them, like, so legit. It's an amazing story. Like, it's documented slightly in the film Man on the Moon, which is the Andy Kaufman biography with Jim Carrey. So worth checking out. What else have we got here? Oh, we've got some photographs from here as well. That's the other thing Cornette's really, really good at. He keeps press clippings of everything because he knows it's important. Maybe it's not important now, but it will be. You know, he was a guy who had John Cena and Batista and Brock Lesnar at OVW. Like, those are his guys. In the same way that Steve Austin or CM Punk are Paul Heyman guys. Those guys who are now Cena, Batista, Orton, they're Jim Cornette guys. But, you know, others as well. Oh yeah, okay. Junkyard Dog, wrestling the Freebirds. How do I put this? Junkyard Dog was a very successful, very talented, and very charismatic black wrestler. The Freebirds are incredibly charismatic, have an amazing song as their theme tune, very good workers, as Confederate as Foghorn Leghorn eating a chicken. Like, it's the angle incredibly steeped in racism. And, you know, for the time, like, I mean, it's awkward now, but back then in the 70s, man, you were like, whew. This is the first appearance of Jim talking about the Montreal Screwjob before Dark Side of the Ring, I think. This is where he lays claim to coming up with the finish. So yeah, I'm seeing the time limit coming up on the clock. So, again, thank you for watching. These are your take-homes. They are very, very good, and I highly recommend them. Thank you for tuning in for this Mondo Funny Books Money in the Bank Cash-In special. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. I will see you live very soon.